Continuing on with Mysteries of Creation, Chapter 2, Part 2. Job also must have understood the great deal of the universe when he said, "Is it not God in the height of heaven? And behold, the height of the stars, how high they are? That thou sayest, O doth God know? Can he judge to the dark cloud? Thick clouds are a covering to him, that he seeth not, and he walketh in the circuit of heaven." Job chapter 22, verse 12 through 14. What did Job mean by speaking the circuit of heaven? Undoubtedly, it was the circuits of the stars and the planets as they revolve in the heavens. For example, we know that the Earth orbits around the Sun at 66,500 miles per hour, while the Sun in its system of circling the core of our galaxy, the Milky Way, at approximately 600,000 miles an hour, making one complete revolution in 200 million years. The Milky Way is in turn believed to be orbiting a supercluster of 2,500 nearby galaxies at something over 1 million miles per hour, while simultaneously moving outward through space at an estimated speed of over 300,000 miles per hour. End quote. The Footstool of God by Rodney Turner, pages 3 and 4. Dr. Turner also explained, quote, "Although the stars comprising a given galaxy appear to astronomers to be an aimless, random motion, they are nevertheless under the ultimate control of our overruling providence. Invisible hands direct the stellar traffic down the trackless highway of galactic space. These bodies, with their planetary systems, constitute wills within wills of time and motion." End quote. You find that in the same book, page 3. Isaiah talked about the circle of the earth over 2,000 years before Columbus set sail, and the history books teach that Columbus discovered that the earth was round. Quote, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers." Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. Moses, instructed by the Lord God, was shown many of his creation nearly 4,000 years ago. Quote, "And God spake unto Moses, saying, Behold, I am the Lord God Almighty, and behold, thou art my son. Wherefore look, and I will show thee the workmanship of mine hands, but not all. For my works are without end, and also my words, for they never cease. And it came to pass that Moses looked and beheld the world upon which he was created." Moses chapter 1, verses 3, 4, and 8. David also spoke of his knowledge of of reverence for God, for the great Creator. Quote, "By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts there of them by the breath of his mouth." Psalms chapter 33, verse 6. "The heavens declare his righteousness, and all the people see his glory." Psalms chapter 97, verse 6. "He telleth the number of stars, he calleth them all by their names." Psalms chapter 147, verse 4. "When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visited him?" Psalms chapter 8, verses 3 and 4. Page 22 of Mysteries of Creation, chapter 2. With such an understanding of earth, the sun, and the stars, David concluded, quote, "The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God." Psalms chapter 14, verse 1. Like the plants, of fowl, fish, and other animal life, the earth has life in itself and is obedient to the commands of its creator. Brigham Young said, quote, "And there is a spirit in the earth. I am inclined at this stage of my remarks to expose my ignorance. I am not aware that any of the philosophers or astronomers have told you that the earth is a living creature and breathes as much as you or I do. It is the life in the earth that forces the internal waters to the summits of those highest mountains which often gush out, forming lakes and springs. End quote. Teachings of Brigham Young, Volume 3, page 241. Helaman stated that the earth is more obedient to God than is man. Quote, how great is the nothingness of the children of men, yea, even they are less than the dust of the earth. For behold, the dust of the earth moveth hither and thither, to the dividing asunder at the command of our great and everlasting God. Yea, behold, at his voice do the hills and the mountains tremble and quake. Yea, and if he say unto the earth, move, it is moved. Helaman chapter 12, verses 7 through 9 and 13. A few other examples showing obedience to the elements of the earth are Moses parting the Red Sea, Exodus chapter 14, verses 21 and 22, and the smiting of the rock and getting water from it, Exodus chapter 17, verse 5 and 6, and Jesus walking on the water, Matthew chapter 14, verses 24 through 26, and the calming of the storm at sea, Mark chapter 4, verse 37 and 39, and also Luke chapter 8, verse 23 through 25, page 23 of Mysteries of Creation. Prophets in this last dispensation have had some knowledge of the wonders of the universe and attributed its creation to a supreme being. In fact, the prophet Joseph Smith may have been way ahead of his time by knowing and understanding about the universe the science has just been slowly grasping. For instance, the theory of relativity discovered by Dr. Einstein could have been familiar to the prophet Joseph Smith. Professor Melvin A. Cook explained, quote, in the particular geometry of relativity, any straight line circles the universe. A revelation to Joseph Smith presented the same concept. Quote, for God doth not walk in crooked paths, neither doth he turn from the right nor to the left. Wherefore his paths are straight, and his course is one eternal round. Doctrine and Covenants, chapter 3, verse 2. This is equivalent to saying that a straight four vector is a circle, a sensible statement in relativity. End quote. Creation and Eternalism, by Cook, page 23. I want to say, as somebody who's received revelations, that Joseph Smith may not have understood everything that he was revealed. Because as a prophet, God gives you a message, and it doesn't always mean that you understand it. And in fact, some of the revelations that I have sat down and written that God has commanded me to write, I read later on, and I'm surprised that, oh my gosh, it's talking about this, and I had no idea, and it's just, the prophet doesn't always understand exactly everything that God is putting forth. There's mysteries within mysteries in the revelations of God. Anyway, continuing. Other interesting information was also received by the prophet Joseph Smith. Quote, the earth rolls upon her wings, and the sun giveth his light by day, the moon giveth her light by night, and the stars also give their light, as they roll upon their wings in their glory, in the midst of the power of God. Unto what shall I liken these kingdoms, that ye may understand? Behold, all these are kingdoms, and any man who hath seen any of the least of these hath seen God moving in his majesty and power. Doctrine and Covenants, section 88, verse 45 through 47. But this life is not all. The voice of reason, the language of inspiration, and the Spirit of the living God, our Creator, teaches us, as we hold the record of truth in our hands, that this is not the case, that this is not so. For the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. at a moment's reflection is sufficient to teach every man of common intelligence that all these are not the mere productions of chance, nor could they be supported by any power less than an almighty hand. And he that can mark the power of an omnipotence inscribed upon the heavens can also see God's own handwriting in the sacred volume. Doctrinal History of the Church, Volume 2, page 14. Orson Pratt, a great deal of his life in the study of astronomy, became a professor and a lecturer on the subject. During one of his discourses in 1875, he read from parts of the section 88 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which dealt with the field of science. And after reading them, he commented, quote, "I have read these sayings from a revelation given over 42 years ago to that youth called Joseph Smith, a farmer's boy. Do they sound like the ravings of a madman? Do they sound like something that was invented and composed by the wisdom of man, or do they sound like truth? Joseph Smith was not a learned man. He had to work for his living when he was a lad, and when God called him and gave these revelations through him, he had not studied any more of the generalities of a young man who now sits in the congregation, and probably not near as much. Yet these words were given to him, and they contain information and knowledge far beyond that which you will find recorded in the writings of the learned. Information expressed so simply that a common mind can in some degree grasp it, and yet so sublime and so great that when we come to investigate its depths, it requires greater powers and greater understanding than what man naturally possesses." Wonders of the Universe by Orson Pratt, page 197, page 25 of Mysteries of Creation. Because of his vast knowledge on the subject of science and creation, Orson Pratt probably had a greater application of the universe. Quote, "What rational being can look upward into the blue vault of heaven, behold the sun in its effulgent glory, the moon shining with its silvery brightness, exhibiting its ever-varying changes, the stars bespangled the vast concave of the nocturnal sky, twinkling as it were with joy and lighting up the dark, unfathomable abyss of the unknown immensity. What rational being, we again inquire, can behold this august and sublime scenery without feeling the most intense desire to unlock the heavenly archives and read from the great book of creation? What grand science of the origin of worlds, the laws by which they are governed, and their eternal destinies? Kings upon thrones and the humblest shepherds in the field have alike participated in this sublime emotion. The poet, enraptured with the magnificent glories of the heavens, has poured forth sublimest effusions, I don't know what that word is, I've never seen it before, in the most melting harmonious strains of glowing eloquence, while the man of God, with loftier views and higher aspirations, has soared aloft from nature's author and outpoured with the infinite greatness and resplendent glories which surround him on every side. He bows in humble adoration before the great eternal, and exclaims, "What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visited him?" Masterful Discourses of Orson Pratt, compiled by N.B. Lundwall, page 293. Brigham Young was so well acquainted with the complexities of creation, quote, "There is an eternity of elements and an eternity of space, and there is no space without a kingdom, neither is there a kingdom without a space. Were the best mathematicians to multiply figures from the time he first commenced to learn at 5 or 10 years of age until he is 100 years old, and until he has exhausted the capacity of figures known to man, he can tell no more about the number of the creations of God in comparison than a mere child who knows nothing whatever of figures. There is no beginning, no end. There is no bounds, no time, when the elements will cease to be organized into bodies with all the variety you have a faintest specimen of on this earth. Teachings of the Prophet Brigham Young, Volume 3, pages 345 and 346 by Fred Collier. Both ancient and latter-day prophets probably understood also the concept of seeing into the past, present, and future. Dr. Melvin A. Cook makes an interesting observation, quote, "Another transcendent concept of modern revelation is the interesting and largely incomprehensible concept that time can flow in reverse. This is implicit in the description in Doctrine and Covenants, section 130, verse 7, that all things in the past, as well as present and future, are continually before the Lord." O. E. Overseth, in an article in October 1969, Scientific America, discussed the possibility of the reverse flow of time, showing that scientists are beginning to think along these lines. Creation and Eternalism by Cook, page 24. Thus it is evident that both science and religion have generally agreed that the universe with its galaxies and solar systems did not come into existence by chance, that there was and is a great creator for each heaven and earth, but there is still much speculation as to how it was constructed, and some of these differing conclusions will be considered in the following chapters. Chapter 3, The Birth of the Earth. Something out of nothing. So I'll make another video concerning that. So that was part 2 of chapter 2. Thank you for listening to this. Please like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. Shalom.